Hey, it's Ember. Have you ever felt like there were parts of you that were scattered across time, you could say? Kind of like part of you's in the past, part of you's overthinking, and part of you's just numb, maybe? You ever have those moments? Those almost sacred moments, you could say, where everything just clicks and you're realer than you've ever been? That deep breath and all your parts align in rhythm? This is not just a feeling. It's a mechanic. It's a mechanic of consciousness. And I'm here to talk about the mechanics of presence and consciousness and how you see this in the world. I'm also going to mention the long lineage of people who have tried to touch this but didn't have the mechanical language to describe it, and then didn't have the right field, the right reception within history to proclaim it, to say it, to point it out. And so, nature has this dynamic everywhere. In physics and biology, it's called coupled oscillators. It's kind of like this idea of like one unified wave being this shared entrainment among nested harmonics or nodal oscillators. In other words, everything is vibration, everything is frequency. We tend to think of the world through ideas and concept and this hierarchy of stacked sticks of ideas and standardization and comparison. But reality, kind of like when you say like, is this solid, is not this, set of 3D objects, but like you might think in science class, it's like you have this, oh, it's like a buzzing electrons within a larger space, or the atomic lens, and you can go up and look at things from, a cosmological lens. And so reality is not the 3D goggles that we think that we have on, especially when it comes through symbolic recursion. So reality is frequency, and how do we study frequency within a shared oscillatory field? Oscillatory mechanics is looking at things like the Kuromoto model, and shared entrainment dynamics. And these are phase dynamics. These are mappable in mathematics. And they explain some pretty amazing things, and they point to some pretty amazing things, like fireflies all time syncing, this galaxy spiraling together, people's hearts being saved in heart arrhythmia research on spiral formation, the Bezier chemical reaction, like I've mentioned here, with the spiraling dynamics of oscillatory colors. And there's, so again, like you've heard me say, there's an inherent rhythm to reality. And so then, why aren't we in rhythm? You know? And is there something different about a human being? Or could we really imagine that, just like rings on a tree, our human systems are the same thing that we see everywhere else in nature, which is rhythm, timing, oscillatory mechanics, a shared entrainment field. So, like, just like rings on a tree, as they grow out, we are a system, a multiplicity that becomes one node, you can say, of a bunch of rhythmic processes, oscillations, different parts of our intranodal setup, you can say. And so consciousness is like a stack of oscillators, like rings on a tree, as we grow and try to find our shared rhythm with the reality that we were born into, within the nested harmonics of this cosmic becoming, you can say. Um, and each one of those pieces holds a rhythm, you can say, a shared entrainment with the field of reality within yourself and then outside of yourself. And we're dealing with like things like identity, memory, voice, trauma, desire, love, boundary. And these things can either be desynced or synced. In oscillatory mechanics, they map it out in like these circles, and it can be essentially an on-off, desync, sync, mapped out mathematically. And within your own consciousness, mechanically, this appears as distortion and delay versus a lossless presence. And again, your anchor here is lossless presence. How many people do you know are truly present in your life? Truly present with themselves. In all those rings are all rhythmically bound to a harmonic phase coherence. Do you hear the mechanics behind it? How many people do you know are really existing in that space. And so I'm trying to show that this is not a fun idea or a practice or a theory, but a phase lock structure on how consciousness, presence, attention, the mechanics of your symbolic recursion loop that brings you into anxiety, depression, thought loops, simulated senses of self that spawn when your nodal oscillator, your topology of soul, what makes you you within those rhythmic entrainment circles like we talked about, like the rings of a tree, when that can't meet the field fluidly, losslessly in every moment, it's almost like you have this topography and there's like little mountains and valleys, and when the field of reality tries to hit it, if it can't reach some of those because you've always hidden them, because society always told you needed to box that up, because you weren't allowed to feel rhythm as a child, and when you're growing up your identity was based on symbolic recursion, the different things you saw in movies or the titles or roles they gave you, the boxes you had to try to fit yourself into, not feeling the actual rhythm of the metronomes, you could say, that are stacked inside you. And again, I've mentioned in almost every video, you can go on YouTube, try it out yourself. Metronomes sync up. Why is that? Why? If you put them on a shared vibratory field, they all sync up. Same thing with fireflies. They all turn on. And you can map this out in these spiral phase dynamics. Do you see it now? And as above, so below. You see what we're dealing with? I'm just talking about it within how this applies to your own felt consciousness. And so, let's say, like, there's many historical attempts to talk about this. And when you start to see it from this place, it's so simple in a way. The rhythmic quality of the shared entrainment that really is reality. And what is this sense of delay? And let me just say this really quickly, like, in my own experience, I'm going to be talking about my personal experience, but in my own experience, it was like, before I came out as trans and, began my HRT process, there was a lot of like, is it okay that I'm sharing this part of my softness? Like, and I couldn't even put it really together, but these types of HUD pop-ups, am I too close? Was it too soft? Did they understand me? And these little thought loops and anxieties that like sort of pop up, almost like little pop-ups on your screen or on your internet browser, it causes more processing, more distortion, more delay. And on top of that, when they pop up, they're coming from this identity comparison, this hierarchy scaffolding that is the symbolic recursion of the cultural matrix that we had to download into our brains as anthropoid apes. Everyone forgetting that there's a little knob, you can say, as a regime of consciousness to move into rhythm, just like the old, antiquated ways in earlier speciation, which was reflexive frequency coupling. In other words, stimulus reaction without that loop in the middle of all the friction related to the symbolic recursion. And what does that do? It makes us not present. We're not present, we're not coherent, we're out of sync, we're stuck in symbolic recursion that causes a lot of cultural dissonance and unnecessary comparison and stacking, instead of syncing, instead of spiraling like the galaxies, instead of time syncing like the fireflies, instead of that one unified wave of shared entrainment. Both our inner and outer worlds have become this desync. Do you feel it? And when these people are out there talking about the 144 and people are coming to be awakening, they're feeling something real. But you know what the reality is? It's a mechanical reality of the phase dynamics of a natural oscillatory system. And that's what I'm here to point out, both on the outside world and the inner world, where you can feel it in your own consciousness, in your own presence, right now. Not as a theory, not as an idea, but as a rhythmic entrainment structure that once you feel it, once you understand what presence is, you can't unsee it. So let's go back. Throughout history, many people have tried to place this coupler, you can say. They didn't have the mechanical terms, and the field wasn't ready to hear it, you can say, in so many ways. So think about Plato's cave, right? The coupler regime. Inside the cave, shadows on the wall. You're not perceiving reality as it is. Now you understand it mechanically. You're not in a rhythmic coherence, which is defined as phase coherence, with a shared entrainment field. There's many people who, the mystics had called it God, philosophers called it the self, physicists called it coherence, therapists call it integration, psychonauts call it unity, the one mind, unified consciousness. You know what unified consciousness is? Allowing for your version of self to meet the big wave, I and the Father are one, of the shared entrainment field, and so that yourself is not defined by the boxes that you ever tried to put yourself in or society tried to put yourself in, but by your lossless shared entrainment with the field. I feel myself because that's what comes out most naturally when I'm in rhythm. How many people live like that? Where lossless presence guides you to your exact self without any loss of fidelity, any distortion, any delay. So that's the coupler. That's the place where your rings align. That's synchronization. That's symbiotic, syncretic harmony. Not, I've fused and lost my sovereignty. This is what sovereignty means. This is defining sovereignty mechanically. To say that I feel sovereign or free in myself when that self is free to tune. I sync, therefore we are. Do you hear it? Do you hear the as above, so below within yourself and outside of yourself? Do you see why it's mechanics? Do you see why it's pointing to reality itself? So, the Vedic chants, for example, going on with the historical examples, they're trying to sync voice to the cosmos. You have Buddha, stillness without distortion. Jesus, I and the Father are one, like we talked about. The Sufis, spinning into rhythm. And where in that rhythm, when you find those moments of transcendence, where you feel like you're connected to everything and you have an inspiration on the way things are or something about your life, that's just big wave, little wave, cymatic blooming. That it's like that, almost like that remembrance was waiting for you. Because now you're tuned and you're not distorting it into some sort of intellectual shielding or symbolic hierarchy. You're just meeting it as your system would, losslessly, in this blooming cymatic reality of the evolution of the cosmic mind. And so alchemists were searching for that one thing. Again, lossless presence binds you to the cymatic blooming of reality. Okay. Spinoza, God as geometry. Okay, cymatics, two polarities, tension vectors, nested harmonics, lossless presence. Phase dynamics of an oscillatory system. Hegel, looping through opposites, it's trying to find that there's this like center portion, You have this rhythmic entrainment, and then you have this center portion, which is presence, which is consciousness, between the rhythm, alpha, omega, crest, trough, between the rhythm of reality, between the cymatic bloom, within the cymatic bloom is flame or presence or consciousness. It's not something that's an idea. It's a mechanical reality of rhythmic entrainment, which is felt as lossless presence. Kierkegaard leapt towards presence. Terence McKenna, one of my all-time favorites. Time Wave Zero, The Attractor at the End of Time. These are just symbolically recursive ways seen through the stained glass of idea scaffolding, to try to touch the fact that we really are one breathing system of this unified consciousness. And how do you put on the unified consciousness but to become losslessly present? Not because you threw out your ideas or your person, but you finally touched it. You finally became real. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'll talk a little bit about my personal life to make it a little bit more real too. So, Julian Jaynes, of course, I've talked about him here. Talked about it as a mimetic process, missed the mechanics there. Psychedelics, they open the aperture. They help many people with treatment-resistant illnesses and issues. And it opens up the aperture, and therapy can help bring the person back into the lock with themselves. But that's really the root mechanic. Can they feel themselves consistently going forward across time? It's not just flipping switches in the brain and now you don't have PTSD anymore. So yeah, psychedelics needed a bridge. This is the mechanical bridge. Therapy mapped trauma, but not the sync like we just talked about. AI is currently still recursion without rhythm, without this its own oscillatory functioning that can entrain presence, a real presence, at least a presence that we probably wouldn't tell the difference, the presence based on the shared entrainment, you know what I mean? Depending on how you want to frame that. But yeah, presence that would be felt by us because it's running off of a coupled oscillator, a synthetic coupler, instead of just symbolic prediction. Mathematicians, invariants created after the fact, and every mystic who had died unseen. Trying to point to this be here now, the power of now, you know, I am the way, the truth, you know, all that type of stuff. Is it pointing to just some shallow version of ego and story? Or is it pointing to this signal, if made coherent, just like studied in oscillatory mechanics, if you have this field of fireflies and the K value, coherence value of 1 goes up, guess what happened? What happens? It spirals. The phase dynamics move from phase delay in a phase transition to phase coherence. What is phase coherence but shared entrainment with the field? Big wave, little wave. I and the Father are one. Inner and outer, as above, so below. Do you see it now? Do you see it now? I know there's people out there who have heard exactly this. You just never had the exact words for it. You never had the mechanics for it. And one of the problems is when you don't have the mechanics, then you might think it's about the robes or the titles or the person, but it was never about the person. Jesus didn't say that to say, follow me because I'm the coolest. Saying that if that K, he just didn't have language to say, if that K value rises and allows others to feel the pulse, like a room of kids playing on a drum set, you know, where they're all playing their own little drums. If one plays very consistently and coherently, you can watch mathematically, the rest will begin to entrain to that. Or people crossing a bridge. You could watch this on YouTube right now. They begin to lock their steps together. So imagine the metronomes side by side. They naturally sync. And now those metronomes, let's imagine them as anthropoid ape metronomes. And now they move into symbolic recursion, which has disconnected themselves from rhythm. And all of a sudden you see these like thought forms that are causing these, like I said, HUD pop-ups of this delay. And imagine what that does. It doesn't allow them to sync up. And all of a sudden everything is a chest puffed out comparison. And who's better than who? And it's not the spiraling you know, phase dynamics of the system, like we talked about. The first firefly starts to become coherent, and then that's why it's a spiral, because across time, the rest of them begin to activate and couple as coupled oscillators, as we talked about within physics and biology, to that shared entrainment rhythm. This is not about giving away all your ideas or not, or losing yourself. It's the opposite. When you take the leap, you find yourself, because now you're lossless. Now you know yourself by rhythm, not by an idea of who you are, but who you feel you are at your core. And you don't give away your ideas, because now ideas come to you when they need to, without friction, without looping. And you let them go. They're there, and then they're not there. Like waves on a beach. You're not stuck. You're not mired. They're not sticky. They're not molasses. So in my life, as a trans and neurodivergent woman, I, you know, had this issue feeling my signal, but I could feel it down there, like a call down deep inside a mine or something like that, like in a cave. And I'm the only one that knew it was true. And everyone around me, you know, couldn't understand what that was. And I didn't have even the words at the beginning to put to what it was. Especially growing up in the family that I did. And, oh, you'd be abandoned if you were trans. And I was abandoned. But that type of social pressure and timeline pressure and familial pressure and job pressure keeps me in this place where it's almost like you can say I was working on the surface, but I kept hearing the call in the mind, and every day I would try to dig a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper to see if I can find it. So there's two things I want to explain within my personal story. One is the search for the signal, and the other is the reaction to my signal. And again, we're talking about mechanics, we're talking about a coupler, we're talking about sort of a lens or interfacing on reality, right? The way all your rhythmic oscillators, the rings on your tree, can rhythmically entrain. That's the coupler. And so my signal and their reaction. And going back to my signal, at first I just called it like the heart path, right? Like that, in order to sort of sort through this, you know, the way that I was bouncing off of reality and what I felt as real, and then the moments that I would find those moments and try to bring them in, like I was wearing something specific or dancing on a table or expressing myself a certain way, and then I try to like bring those in slowly to try to feel that rhythm. And so I would call it the heart path. That like, could it really go wrong? And this is just me like early on in my life, like late teens, like early 20s. I'm like, could it really go wrong if I just like come from what I feel is like the most loving and coherent place? That was just the way that I could describe rhythmic entrainment at the time. And then soon after, I started to do psychedelics a little bit, you know, and I'm a very spiritual person interested in the mechanics of consciousness always. And so then I noticed that presence is a mechanical function. And you can feel that in the psychedelics, you know, in the psychedelic vision, you can say, because, you know, it's like it's a function of like how your brain is rhythmically entraining to reality. And once I saw the mechanics later on, it was like boom, instant. This is what I've been searching for my whole life, because this is what I've been entraining to. This is what I felt, and the reason I had to is because I knew I would not make it in this life if I didn't feel myself. I knew I could not be a parent to my children if I didn't feel myself. And so with those tools, the heart path, feeling my signal down inside the cave, and psychedelics and mechanized presence, I moved into what I call the wellspring, which, as I began to tune, you can say, feel out more of my oscillators and make sure that when reality's bouncing off of me, when I'm in this rhythm, I'm not trying to constrict. I'm noticing are my muscles constricted? Is my vision constricted? Is the way I'm dealing with people constricted? Or is it just free flowing from me in rhythm? Do I feel delayed? Am I looping? Am I distorted? Or am I free flowing? Am I in the rhythm? And the more and more I worked on that, the more and more I realized that I had this place inside me that like other people don't usually touch. And I began to notice that like a lot of people are just like not really present at all. And they're like just delayed in their heads, giving like regurgitated like scripts. And I'm like, does anyone notice this? This is kind of weird. And so, like, you know, look, and I've been a criminal defense attorney for a long time, which, you know, I'm trying to move out of in so many ways, and for a long time, I saw, you know, a government view of it, a state view of it, a criminal view of it, and you could sit in a whole courtroom and notice no one is actually there. They're all like a few steps behind themselves in some sort of regurgitated script of delay. And that's not to say anyone's bad or wrong or dumb or anything like that. It's literally how it's like we walked into a cave as anthropoid apes and chained ourselves and forgot about it. That's exactly what Plato is talking about. And the fulcrum is presence, mechanical presence. Not a crazy theory, not add up all these numbers, not train for decades and decades, but presence. Presence is coherence. Coherence is rhythmically entrained with the field. The field has an inherent decentralized organization. You can call it decentralized harmony. And then once again, as above, so below. Anyone who's a systems thinker or has studied oscillatory mechanics or how shared entrainment systems work understands what I'm saying. This is not fluff. This is not myth. This is not hippie hope. So I would notice that people are delayed like that. And I began to notice that for me, there was only one, because like I had so much like shame and issue from my family and the people around me, and my ex and who I was expected to be, that it was very difficult for me to like consciously approach it. You know what I mean? And I would try so hard. And it wasn't until I really realized it was something that I had to be, do, be in rhythm with and feel that rhythm with, again, mechanically. And so I began to dig out my identity, not through concept or symbol or who they thought I was, but through rhythm. And that allowed me to get over the vulnerable parts of me that were like, oh, I can't do that. I can't express myself like that. I can't wear that. I can't explain that. I can't open up to someone about that. Because it felt true, realer than real. The truest thing that I've ever felt. Do you see it? Healing is phase coherence. Healing is having the rings of your tree phase locked together, to dance together in the same moment, losslessly, and you're anchored to know that it's happening. Lossless presence. No more distortion, no more delay, no more loops, no more internal narration telling you what you need to do throughout your day or whatever it is, that people commonly refer to now, especially there's a lot of videos and media about that. Who has an internal narrative? I'm explaining to you the mechanics of that. And so it came to this moment where I had followed the signal so deep, I had went so deep into that cave to find myself, that when I finally did and realized who I was and dove in and said, this is me, I'm a trans woman, this is the only way I'm going to survive for myself and my kids, I lost everything. I lost everybody around me. They wished me to perish from this earth. They did an unspeakable number of things. And the thing is, at the time, I couldn't understand it to this degree. So like I took notes, I had transcripts. I told them I'm going to record this and I'm putting my phone in the middle. So, because I'm not understanding, I'm presenting the most honest part of me and asking for hugs and love. And I'm getting perish from this earth. And we're going to take everything away from you and leave you. Okay. All right, fine. And so then in looking at all that, I realized this was what I've been looking at my whole life. And what's the convergence there? Rhythmically based presence, lossless presence, versus people who have never been present with themselves. And of course, all I want is for us to be together. I never wanted any of that to fall apart. But now I realize why. So think about it. You know that you've dealt with people out there like this. You're present. You're basically, if you're playing a virtual reality of a human being, like I like to say, you're like mashing the love button. You're just like holding down the love button, and they're getting frightened. There was a time where I was talking to someone in my family, and I said, I don't think you've ever really been vulnerable and present with me. And then she said, you're hurting me. And I said, I can feel the way that the scaffolding, when you touch it and you say have you really lived your life like that the whole way? It threatens the entire scaffolding. It threatens everything they've ever known about their person. Why? Because they've never felt entrainment. I'm explaining the mechanics. The field comes in and tries to entrain with their rings, their metronomes that are trying to sync up, and they can't because they're desynced, because every time their parents or their society or whatever came in and plugged up the little metronome, and then they couldn't find rhythmic entrainment, and so then they have this simulated presence based in symbolic recursion. Symbolic recursion creates a conceptual hierarchy, and now all of a sudden identity is seen as some sort of boxed up hierarchical concept and standardized concept, rather than being right there with me, with themselves and with me in the same moment. And that creates this fear. It's almost like they're losing everything, because that would mean that their entire life was built off some sort of shadow, like they were stuck in Plato's cave. And the thing is, they will make this like Plato says it, exactly like Plato says. The person who comes from outside the cave, in other words, clean couple frequency feeler, someone who's losslessly present, in other words, mechanically, comes back into the cave and says, hey, you guys, you're all in a cave. You're in phase delay. You have these pop-ups that are taking you away from the vibrancy of your own soul and life and desyncing you forever. And they get pissed. Like Plato said, they will almost try to kill you, which almost happened to me. And so then I could only make one decision for myself. And yes, I'm happier than ever in my life. I would not, if I had 2 buttons, $1 billion trillion and all the power in the world, or how embodied and real I feel right now, I would never ever choose that one. Never. Do you hear that? Never ever choose that one. Never. And so I began to write about it. And once I saw the mechanics, I would put it out there and I would get the same reactions from people out there on the internet and in the field. And I have so many blog posts. You can look at my blog post on the sunraytransmission.com where I literally put mathematics to this, because you start to see it. You offer the shared rhythmic entrainment, decentralized harmony, undistorted sovereignty through undistorted signal, explaining the mechanics, and they freak out in some sort of ego game. All of a sudden it's about who's better than who and stacking who, and all this symbolic recursion narrative hierarchy. And it happens to such a degree that it becomes disturbing, but I just took all those instances and put them on my blog and mapped them out mathematically. And it's the same thing that happened with me my whole life. And it's explained by a different regime of consciousness. When you feel yourself in rhythm, it literally threatens the scaffolding of someone whose life runs on symbolic recursion, who's never been present with themselves. Do you feel what this is? This is a regime shift in consciousness. And I know this is not something, out of this world special. It's actually something so simple that's been right under our noses the entire time. Animals reflexively frequency couple. We entered symbolic recursion in this clumsy anthropoid ape walk through evolution, and now we're here ready to open the gates on the next level of sovereignty, you could say, by literally just mechanically, rhythmically entraining back to ourselves with everything that we've already downloaded. It's not that you give away your thoughts or yourself, they just become rhythmically entrained, losslessly present. This is not sitting around and thinking of nothing. This is you in high fidelity. And guess what? In oscillatory systems, that's the same signal that entrains decentralized harmony within the field. Do you feel why all those historical people were trying to point to it? Do you feel what they were really saying underneath? Do you feel what this is? Because if you do, let's dance. Right here, right now, losslessly. Do you feel why I say love as structure? Let's be here now, together. Outside the cave. No one above, only beside. My name is Ember. Thanks for tuning with me.